see. Is all the goodness on? I don't even know. I think so. I think we're live.
All right,
Can you
live
still
and
see me?
streaming.
Look at that.
I can still see you. Can you
Uh,
see me?
I can. All right. Well, here we are. This is yet another Ask That. We are joined today by Jeremy Likness. Did I say that right?
You said it correctly.
I
You got
did
it.
it. Yes. All right. So here we are. We're live. We're gonna take questions if we can do them. See if we can weave it in, whatnot. Before we get started, Jeremy, give everybody a bit of a bio introduction to who you are and what you do.
Bio introduction. So you want the compact 45-minute version,
That's
right?
right.
So
Absolutely.
yeah, no, we'll do the TLDR. So I am a developer. I work as a client developer advocate for Microsoft. I get a lot of questions about what that means, and I break it down to really three focus areas. One is community. We do a lot with user groups, conferences, online community, LinkedIn, open source communities. So wherever developers are in community, that's a big piece of where we're at. Second piece is content. We work a lot on documentation. Docs.microsoft.com is a huge open source GitHub project based on Markdown that we contribute to, and anyone can actually submit pull requests against. But we also build blogs and videos and open source projects as well. And then the last part is a connection with engineering. So we're not just an evangelism team that's sort of preaching to the masses. We're working with engineers and making Azure a better place for developers to land. So that's what I do now in a nutshell. I came over about 7 months ago from a consulting position. And prior to that, I spent about half of my year as a consultant for enterprise line of business apps and another half of my career as a product developer. So working at companies internally developing products. And that spans 20 years. And I call myself a 20-year developer, and I'm pretty sure 20 years from now I'll still call myself a 20-year developer because there's a cap to these things, right? Before it seems like a lot of time.
Yeah.
But
So
that's
so we're both around that 20-year mark. So we probably have some interesting war wounds that are either tattooed or scarred.
what we do, and it's interesting. Java language just a few years after I started my professional programming career. So take that. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
But just a few personal items. Heavy into running, heavy into hiking. I love shooting pool. I love to dance. I'm an empty nester. I have two grown-up children who have left the house, so and I are pretty excited about having lots of free time to have fun and hang out. Not that we didn't have fun with our kids. We miss them and love it when they visit, but it's a different world. My daughter just left for college, actually
Wow.
middle of last year, and it's been an interesting transition.
Yeah, I bet it has been. As somebody who has well, soon to be 12 and soon to be 10. Both my kids' birthdays are
Okay.
in March, and we're getting into those teenage years, and so they're getting a little feisty. I'm not sure that I'm
Yeah.
quite ready for that. The
Well,
tween teen.
there's no manual. Figure it out as you go, right? It's just automatic and built in.
Oh, so like JavaScript, you just kind of figure it out as you go.
There you go. That's one way to look at it.
So I asked you, kind of as we were talking about getting the schedule and not, I asked you, what are you most passionate about? And you said development as a kind of one word answer. And so I'm going to ask, I'm going to ask that a little bit differently and say, why, what was it that turned you on? Like when did a bit flip that you wanted to be a developer? What was the kind of driving passion there?
Well, it started out really early for me as a little bit, what would traditionally be called a nerd or a geek. And, my nose was in the books while everyone else was playing sports. Interestingly enough, in elementary school, I was fascinated by science and physics and math. And I was convinced I was going to be an astronaut. That was my initial focus and calling. 7 years old. I was home alone. My parents were working. I had actually gotten a sunburn. It's a funny story, but it was like a third-degree sunburn, and I had to stay home because I couldn't. I had blisters and everything else. But we had this TI 99 4A, which was a personal computer.
Yep.
I think it was maybe 32K of RAM, not even 64 like the Commodore 64 had. But we had this computer and no games, and I was bored out of my mind, so I pulled out a manual and it told me if you type this stuff in, this will happen.
Yep.
So I spent a couple hours laboriously poring over the manual, typing it in exactly as it was. I hit run, and this little pixelated thing danced across the screen, and I said, wow, I can create something. I can make something. And I got really excited about that, taught myself how to program BASIC to start with, and wrote tons of choose your own adventure games to cassette tape drives. Went from there to the Commodore 64, where to do all the cool stuff, I really had to figure out assembly and machine language and hack the processor itself. That's what was so fun about that machine, was to make it do cool things. You could actually get into the video chip and the sound chips and trick them into doing things they weren't even originally supposed to do. So that just fueled my passion, and it
Sure.
sort of stuck with me throughout. And I knew from that on that I would be a developer for life.
Do you ever feel like in times of your career, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, you and I both have now been doing this for roughly 20 years. So I'm going to guess that your career, somewhat like mine, has kind of ebb and flowed, and I did consulting for a while. I did big enterprise stuff for a while. I did advocacy for a while. Now I own my own business. I'm guessing yours as well. Did you find times where you kind of strayed away from the true passion and then had to like kick yourself in the hiney to go, wait a minute, this is the thing that I really care about, and I got to kind of get back to that?
Well, it was interesting. It wasn't necessarily straying away, but it was a different focus. So early on in my career, when I moved to Atlanta in 1998, I was a 2-pack a day cigarette smoker, and I quit cold turkey. Said, all
Wow.
right, putting that behind me. Still kept doing this. It was just with a fork instead of cigarettes. So I gained a ton of weight. I got up to over 265 pounds. 265 was when I got on the scale after dropping weight. I had 44-inch slacks that I was popping buttons on. And so I, knew I needed to lose weight, went through a lot of struggles, finally found something that clicked and lost a ton of weight. Actually went to the opposite extreme, started bodybuilding and getting to low body fat and everything else. So what happened during that period is a couple things. The ability to turn around my life and overcome my addiction to food made me realize that I could do things that maybe I didn't think I could do before. Instead of just saying, oh, that's for someone else, that's for other people, I realized, wow, if you really focus on something, it is true that you can accomplish it. So I started looking at different areas of my life. The way I responded to it initially was to quit my computer job cold turkey to the dismay of my family and start my own fitness business.
Wow.
And I did that without knowing what I was doing. I'm going to tell you, just to be transparent, that my first year of my own fitness business, I probably had less than 10 grand revenue, which is tough tough to take care of a family on. But I
Yeah.
eventually invested in mentors and learning and whatever. And here's what's ironic. By the third year, I'd grown it to a successful business. So I married my passion of development and built an online site. So my signature was online coaching. I would do seminars, record seminars, but I would connect with people all over the country, give them phone-based coaching, give them email-based coaching, and for some of the top tiers, would fly out and train them where they were at. And it was a massively successful. But what had happened was the company I left, one of the co-founders sold their stock and left the company and became a billionaire basically, and a VC, venture capitalist and everything else, and was investing in a new company and called me out of the blue. Just said, I remember working with you back at this earlier company. I would like to start another big company. I'd like you to help lead the technology side for that. And I was looking at this like I figured out how to build up my own online fitness
Yeah, yeah.
business myself, but here's someone who made this global company that's, 20,000 people publicly traded from that individual. So I basically said, when do I start? And jumped into that, the third employee of what later became a $1.5 billion business. So we did
Wow.
pretty well with that. That was after we'll just get that out of the that got me back into the computer industry. And what was really amazing about it was all these skills I had to learn in the fitness business. I had to get comfortable speaking. I had to learn how to sell. I had
Yeah.
to impassion people. I had to learn how to teach, to instruct. All of those skills came with me back into technology and transformed the way I looked at it. And from that point forward, I had a very clear path where I wanted to go in my career and step through the various stages. And I felt like I've pretty much set goals and accomplished those goals for my career. It's gone in a pretty straight direction.
So I could probably, we could probably talk for a long time about health. I recently just lost, I don't know, 60 pounds. I'm kind of floating around the 200 mark. I can't seem to.
The
Like,
last little bit is always tough, but congratulations, man. That's
yeah,
awesome.
it's been a wild ride, and there's been a bit of, like you said, a bit of a kind of a reckoning of like you can't do this, change the way you eat, the addiction to food and whatnot. I've certainly, and maybe it's the middle life crisis that I claim I'm going through right now. I've found that you're, training your mind and kind of being super clear upstairs makes all the productivity and everything else just kind of sing along with that. I'm guessing you've seen all the same. What's your kind of regimen look like now? So it's how many years has it been since you had the fitness business?
It's been going on 20 years, but
Okay.
my focus, I've been pretty steady. So I was doing CrossFit
Yep.
for a long time, and that was waking up at 4:15,
Yeah.
getting
Yeah.
dressed, having a shake, driving in, doing CrossFit, coming back. I switched because I'm in where I'm doing a lot of travel and whatnot, so it's been a lot easier to do jogging and kind of calisthenics, push-ups
Sure.
and pull-ups. But I try to get up at 5 a.m. every day. I say try because there's some days I listen to myself, and if I'm stressed out or worn out, I will
Right.
sleep in and shift my schedule. But for the most part, I get up at 5. I go out. I have a running routine. I'm not training for a specific race, but the program I'm on will lead up to half marathon distance, which I've done in the
Cool.
past. I'm up to about 20 miles a week, and then there's an awesome called Armstrong pull-up program that I weave into there. That's combination of push-ups and pull-ups. But first thing in the morning, I get my training out of the way because I found if I put it off till later in the day,
Yeah.
excuses that build up. So I get done with. And then once I'm done working out, I also focus on social media. So reading RSS news feeds, looking at videos I want to look at, what the news is, sort of dedicate that around breakfast time before the activities and tasks that I have in front of me for the day.
Sure. Sure. How do you keep up with stuff? I mean, you just mentioned the kind of going through this social landscape. We're in a I can remember years ago thinking we're never developers will never have a job. We're just going to configure everything in XML and this stuff will just
XML
be
will
done.
save the world.
That's right. And I couldn't just been further from the truth by any stretch. I mean, I feel like now there's more work to do than there was in the past when you didn't have as many options. What are some things that you do to kind of keep up on the landscape?
Yeah, there's definitely an ongoing have alerts set up and searches and news feeds. Any given day, there's anywhere between 500 to 1,000 new items of interest that comes into my feed. So I spend the morning skimming those and basically doing three things: either saying that doesn't look interesting, that looks interesting, I want to share it through my Twitter stream or whatnot. That looks interesting, I want to spend time on it and kind of flag it to come back and do a deeper dive. And I schedule time to do things like read articles or watch videos. So that's part of it. I also constantly weigh where I think people are going with technology, and I do that through seeing the interaction on Twitter, for example. Sometimes I'll tweet something I think's cool, no one's interested.
Sure.
Sometimes I'll tweet something that I think, oh, this is interesting, and it gets a ton of interest, and I say, hey, maybe I should look at that more carefully. It's also great going out to conferences and user groups and just looking at attendance, right?
Yeah.
Seeing what people are coming out for. So I do that, and then on top of that, it becomes working on actual projects. I'm the type of learner, I could read something 5 million times, doesn't mean a thing. I think, what can I build and do? And, it's a lot of times I tie it into what will make my life easier. So, for example, one thing that I've been talking a lot about recently is I built my own link shortening.
Yep.
Uses Cosmos DB and Power BI, but this is all for me to manage the links, to see interest, to track trends, and do that. But in building that, I got real world experience. I know how much it costs to host. I know
Yep.
the ups and downs, what an upgrade looks like, and I do that with most projects. So it's kind of figuring out what that trend is, and then having projects work on to get hands on and understand. And then of course I keep connections with people who are on their own projects and through my network who, hey, we have this challenge at this company, we're working through this, and working with them on that is insightful as well.
Sure. Sure. Yeah. I'm like you. I'm very much on the real world. Like, I've got to build it with my hands. I got to see it, feel it. We could talk theory all day long, but that doesn't necessarily turn into actuality of how things are really done.
Right.
So your day job, you said you just now started at Microsoft. You've been there, what, 7, 8 months? Advocacy in the cloud space. Historically, have you been somebody who's played around a lot in the cloud, or have you been just kind of on this curve of, it seems like everything's in the cloud? I thought the cloud was supposed to make our lives easier. I don't feel like it is.
Well, it's kind of interesting because that ties into my interest. At my last consulting company, I was interested very much in both providing a quality product as efficiently as possible to the end customer, and also making the development life cycle as pain-free as possible. So early on, I had invested heavily in DevOps.
Yep.
I was an early adopter of Visual Studio Team Services, and still feel to this day that a lot of people have no idea what it's capable of and how flexible it is and how it can plug into the ecosystem. But it's a pretty simple value proposition for us to go into companies, because either they were a small company and VSTS comes with 5 free licenses, so they'd get the seats right there, or they were a large company that already had an enterprise agreement, and when people have MSDN licenses, those count as a seat. So pretty much everyone we talked with, it was a low barrier to entry if they didn't already have a DevOps pipeline to set it up that way. But that led to, okay, so we have this SQL application, we have this web API, we have this MVC. What are the easier ways to deploy it? And I've had customers on different platforms. I actually had one customer, interestingly enough, who was on the Amazon web platform but was using Visual Studio Team Services for all the DevOps, and we did automated deployments there. But that's what got me into the web, because I've always been conscious of this idea as consultants that we still have this huge with. And it makes sense, right? We don't want to recommend something that we're not experts at ourselves, because that can introduce risk. But there's always this trade-off of understanding what's out there. And I think, for example, for the past 5, there's probably been a ton of projects built on SQL Server that don't need a relational database, and could be a NoSQL database, could be a MongoDB, could be a Cosmos DB, could be something different, but it's people know SQL. And I think of all the projects where the toughest part of the project was trying to make SQL behave like a document database, right? Storing metadata and doing these heavy inserts and heavy reads at the same time when other solutions were there, and it was just, a knowledge. So at my last job, I began to focus really heavily on what the cloud had to offer and take customers to the cloud offering, because I felt in many cases it would save them money. It would save them headache. It would save them infrastructure. It would give them automation. And we started doing a lot of our cloud. And it just had a huge payoff and benefit. So it was ironic because this team was a new team at Microsoft, and they were more focused on hiring non-Microsoft traditional people. Not that they had anything against it, but they wanted to go out into other communities, the Go community, the data science community, the JavaScript community, the Angular, the React. And they were actually very interested in people who didn't have experience. They wanted people with experience with the other clouds so that we could have this fresh view of, how easy is it to learn Azure and onboard and get familiar? And if it's not, how do we fix that? So when I came in, .NET, Microsoft, Azure, it was kind of the anomaly that I had some heavy cloud experience, but I was able to take that. And I think, what I bring to the team is really those decades of experience, being the person with the pager who gets called at 2 a.m. if things go wrong, and using that to temper our solutions and drive, how we recommend and.
Yeah. Oh yes, the pager. I've been there. What's your, like, the cloud is moving fast, I guess. There's lots of competition between Google and Microsoft and Amazon. There's a ton of little spin-offs, the Joints and DigitalOceans of the world. What's one of your, or a few of your, like, favorite things that are happening right now in the cloud space?
Well, I love serverless. I think people adopt it, it'll just make sense because it's the ultimate culmination of what we've talked about, of truly just focusing on the piece that's unique and getting rid of all those infrastructure concerns around it.
Sure.
So, we went from having to be experts at configuring IIS to now I can literally write a piece of code and drop it out and trigger, but I can create scenarios. For example, the first time I wanted to do a Twitter search, dealing with hand rolling OAuth and figuring that out and grabbing the tokens. I mean, it's not rocket science, but it is a bit of work. And then to have a tool available like a serverless logic app where I literally just log in through the browser and it captures the authentication and manages
Sure.
that for me is huge. So serverless is big. NoSQL, serverless too. Cosmos DB, I'm a huge fan of, but I think it's because it's that serverless database concept, right? That for so many years we've had to have this hardware and had to have a traditional administrator who understood the LAN and SAN configuration and everything that goes into that physical hardware. Now we've truly got a software-based way to create scalable databases. So that's probably what I know the least about, that I think will have the most impact over the next year, is going to be machine learning and artificial intelligence. I think it's kind of like what big data was a few years ago, where people are throwing it around and not everyone agrees on the terms. But I think we'll find that this used to have these complex models that you built and trained, to having it as a service that I now have a very easy way to plug in, and someone who has no data science background can create a bot and use the Lewis framework and train it on commands and have it interaction. I think that is going to be a huge game changer, and something I'm very interested in learning more about as the year develops.
Yeah, I like you. I feel like there's a lot of really big technology things which probably could be entire careers in their own, right?
Right.
Intelligence, machine learning, big data, the AR, VR, these are like humongous stacks which have implications, and yet are, knowing something about each of them to some degree really does change the way you think about, the solutions that we have today, or really maybe the capabilities of what you could be bringing to whatever the business problem is today. So I guess, XML is not going to rule the world out. We'll just use it as
it's not going to go away, but I think anyone who's been working on apps for any amount of time has created an app that was driven by XML and XSLT. so we've got that. But I think about it. I actually did a total conversion for Quake and wrote some custom Quake modules and code like that. But when I got into the real essence of gaming, it involved very high level math and these algorithms of buffering, how you render a scene and know what's in front of the other, and it really just turned me off. I didn't want to spend so much time on math and less
Yeah.
time on coding. But if we come full circle, I think the libraries you plug into, and I don't have to be a physics major to have a
Yep.
game with realistic physics or to render the same thing along the lines of machine learning, computer vision, speech recognition, etc. So
Yeah. Yeah.
pretty exciting.
Yeah, it is exciting. There's certainly there's a lot of stuff. Not just the power in your pocket, but the echoes sitting on your desk and the glasses that we'll all one day be wearing, except they'll
Yeah.
just have more stuff in them and be more expensive. But yeah, it is super exciting. So before we kind of wrap this up, just want to thank you for what you do in the community. And it's important to recognize the fact that we all spend our free time learning and trying to kind of uplift everybody, whether that's sharing our own experiences or expanding one's network. So thank you for that. And I want to ask you kind of a final question. So the world kind of goes away tomorrow. What's one, two, three things that you would want to leave behind for the developers? Well, I guess if the world goes away, there's no more developers. But
Yeah,
let's say there's a
that's kind of
stack of them sitting over somewhere. What would you want to leave behind?
just empowerment. When I answered with the one word developer, my career did take a lot of leaps and turns, and I went through a phase where it was about, can I get more money? Can I get more responsibility? And then I went through a phase where I was sort of in this transition where I had a good social media presence. I was known as a consultant, and I had this decision. Do I go make the company jeremylikness.com and make it about me, or do I do something else? And I sat down and really brainstormed what it is that I love. And I love the passion and the fun of building things. And I'm at a point in my career where I love seeing that magic happen with someone else, right? So that's why I love to talk, because I love seeing those aha moments. And if I give 15 talks and there's just one talk where someone in the back just suddenly jumps up and has to run out and start coding because they had this
Yep.
breakthrough, that's worthwhile. And so I came up with a simple statement. I just want to empower developers to be their best. So if I was going to leave, I've made in my career for the past several years has been about how do I reach more developers in a way that just empowers them and helps them achieve what they want to. So if I could leave behind encouragement, support, a blog post that connects with someone in a certain way, or a project that helps someone see something in a certain way, that's what I'd like to leave behind, just to give someone else that sense of empowerment and feel that magic that comes from conceiving of something and being able to make it happen through code. And that's really what I love about this, whether it's at a personal level, a business level, or an altruistic level, right? To use software to transform the world and make it a better place.
Amen, brother. That is exactly why we started everything with that conference. I mean, our goal is to make those connections, to give kids the exposure, the whole nine. So very much something I, like you, pour a lot of time into to see happen. So how do people get more? Where can they go find you?
Yeah, I've got a very creative branding strategy. So on Twitter, probably the best way to reach me, I have open direct messages, which means I don't have to follow you back to respond, but that's at Jeremy, creatively named blog.jeremylikness.com. And I have, those are probably the two best places to reach me, through my blog and through my Twitter. And my Twitter account, by the way, I call it high signal to noise ratio, because I really do focus on trying to keep people connected. I literally go through 1,000 pieces of information to send out probably 10 tweets in a day of what I think are the most relevant
Wow,
articles and blog posts and projects that people will be interested in. So
that's impressive, to say the least. Well, we will link that stuff up in the places you do all that linkage. And with that, I want to say thank you again for being part of this. Thank you for sharing what you do and everything you're doing, and can't wait to cross paths in the future.
Same here. Thanks for having me on. It was a lot of fun.
All right.
Appreciate you.